Hi everyone, I'm Zan, your astrologer, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of May the 17th, 2021. We have a really active and powerful sky with so very many different celestial conversations, adding a different nuance to our experience. And at the same time, we also have a really significant energy shift where the sun leaves the sign of Taurus and enters into the sign of Gemini. So I would like to wish a very happy birthday period for all Gemini natives. But we're also under the influence of an energy shift which just happened very, very recently. And because this is a big planet, we can very well consider it as the energy still shifting, so leaving the old sign and trying to embody the vibrations of the new sign, and that is Jupiter leaving the sign of Aquarius and entering into its ancient ruling sign of Pisces. And these two energy shifts have something in common, because at the time when the sun leaves the sign of Taurus and enters Gemini, immediately it holds a square with this Jupiter in its home sign of Pisces. So this energy may be one of extremes. For some people it can be an extreme high. For other people it can be the beginning of a really bitter disillusioning, yet it doesn't really matter how it feels. What matters is that it is needed, it is necessary, it is for our greatest good without a shadow of a doubt. And there is an energy of similar vibration taking place also next week, where the ruling planet of Gemini, Mercury, holds a conversation of tension, a square, with another planet in the sign of Pisces, the modern ruler of this part of the sky, Neptune. So this is where two rulers, Mercury and Neptune in their domicile, are also kind of providing and triggering a really powerful disillusioning, which can be experienced on a totally different level, totally different scale, perhaps with a different theme. But this makes this energy that much more complex because we have a really strong spiritual and psychological, basically disillusioning energy, Jupiter squaring the sun, and then we have more of a reality check, down to earth energy, where we are kind of invited to take control of our ideals and try to balance them out so that they don't defeat our practical mind, neither to our practical mind our sense of reality, to turn our ideals into something bitter and sour. So it's not very easy. Fortunately, we have certain harmonious celestial conversations to help us, to give us a sense of control, to give us a sense of that we are not really alone, that other people out there are doing the same thing and are successful at it, which means that we also have this potential to be balanced, to be realistic, but also optimistic, hopeful, spiritual, yet not with our heads and hearts totally in the clouds. There is a very strong alchemical energy at play here as well, where we can transmute the bitterness or the unpleasantries or perhaps the disappointment into something very artistic, sometimes even into value, into money, into an income. Because before the sun leaves the sign of Taurus, it holds a trine with Pluto in Capricorn. So this is money, this is being in control of our financial lives. But being in control also involves being very realistic. And it also represents being extremely realistic with our self-worth. But I'll talk about this energy just a little bit later on. Because perhaps, even though these energies are extremely influential, especially psychologically, especially, our communication, what we express, what we share, our relationships to other people in any kind of sense, romantic, family members, siblings, parents, friends. Mars is in the sign of Cancer, so family and culture, a country, somewhere we belong is also included in this relations with others. But it can also include one's relation with society seen as a whole. And it is our perceptions, our views, our vision, our understanding, also what is deeply subjective and personal, but at the same time also which reality kind of reflects and shows us, will be game changers in this sense. But it is more like an alignment, it is more like a groundedness where we don't just take one side of the spectrum as in a very concrete down-to-earth perspective, neither do we just take a highly philosophical, spiritual, even psychological, like positive psychology perspective, because none of the two extremes are going to serve us all that much, but rather this is where the conversations of tension between the planets in Gemini and Pisces come into play. We try to find the middle path, the balance, the harmony in both of these reflections, what we feel on the inside and also what physical reality and our communications, relationships, feedbacks from others reflect back at us. And once we can embody one way or another this state of balance, finding the delicate equilibrium between the two. And don't get me wrong, this is mutable energy, so this might require us to juggle all the time. It is not just something that we fixate on and that's how it's gonna be, but rather this is where we have to kind of juggle, adapt, realign, permanently strive to keep that balance according to the situations or our feelings, our moods, and whatever happens in outer reality to each moment, each hour, each day of the week. So it's basically like riding a bicycle. We have to keep this balance, but once we get into the theme of it, it will go on autopilot. We won't feel it as a struggle. Neither will we be dominated by that uncertainty and fear that our balance is very delicate and we can fall with just a wrong movement, a wrong choice, decision, word, etc. When it becomes, like an autopilot, it won't be that hard. It will be quite easy because we already have a taste of how beneficial the balance is. So what we have to do in order to maintain it, sustain it, keep it, won't feel like that difficult. The difficulty may be experienced at the very start of the week when both of these energies start coming online. And at the same time, Mercury is entering shadow, so when it will go retrograde, whatever we are learning right now to keep that balance will be a main theme, in the sense that we will have to work on it, refine it, and integrate it permanently into our mindset and our mental, intellectual methodology, because what we think, how we communicate, how we solve problems through our intellect is ultimately what we are going to be experiencing in reality and everything in our lives. Now, even though all of this is fantastic, and there are, as I said, other celestial conversations which can represent blessings, easy energy, moments when we feel that fate smiles on us, but let us not forget that we are before an extremely powerful and basically perception changing a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius taking place on the 26th of May. And that eclipse is so very powerful and strong exactly because it's about our perceptions. It's about our mastery of existence itself, if this makes sense. Not just individually, because individually this can fall into any place in one's chart. So the theme might be a little bit different, or it might play out differently. And at the same time, for some people, it won't be that very life-changing strictly personally, but collectively speaking, it's really big. And we might be individual drops of water in an ocean, yet we are in the ocean, so we are interconnected. And this is exactly the main theme of Jupiter in Pisces, and at the same time even in Neptune in Pisces, just on a much more deeper level. So whatever happens on the world stage, so to speak, even if it's just a karmic energy, a karmic discharge, we're going to be feeling it that much more intensely. And if you'd like to know more about this eclipse and how it's going to influence our lives, I have a special recording dedicated for this eclipse and how it's likely to influence our lives. And I'm going to be sharing the link to that video in the description below, so check it out if you are guided to. But the main theme in one simple phrase is: this eclipse will either shatter or reinforce our beliefs. And that is basically big. It is much bigger, karmically at least, than anything else, because, for example, like in quantum physics, the Schrödinger's cat, perception is existence itself. It is everything. Without our perception, nothing truly matters. Like, for example, without our specific way of perceiving the Mona Lisa painting, well, it's just a group of atoms. For nature, it might just be a piece of junk, but if we add our perception onto it and the value system and everything that basically makes us human, well, it is of great value, great inspiration, like a fossil in the history of arts, etc. So this is why basically perception and what we believe determines absolutely everything, especially in a time like this, especially when we're going through a massive world change, and especially when the divine was never this close to us. And Sagittarius, especially its highest expression, is our connection to the divine mind, to the divine source, to the divine intelligence. Perhaps symbolically speaking, that is why we also have the galactic center, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, holding everything together in Sagittarius. Even its scientific name is Sagittarius A star. And another important, yet very much neglected power player in Sagittarius, a permanent guest here, is the Great Attractor, a spatial anomaly so powerful that it can bend the galactic clusters and it can send galaxies in different directions. And if that's not a symbol of what faith and basically intelligence combined with perception in a creative way can do, then I don't know what is. But anyway, enough of philosophies. There'll be much more personal episodes of these kinds of philosophies for each and every one of us, because this is where the total lunar eclipse / super full moon is going to be taking place in the sky. So basically, let each and every one decide what existence and being a guest in this world means for them personally. So at the very beginning of the week, we have a really spiritual energy at play, because the sun in the sign of Taurus still is going to meet the planetoid Sedna, also in the sign of Taurus. Now Sedna is like a permanent guest of the sign of Taurus, because it takes her about 10,000 years to orbit the sun. So she is one of the slowest moving planetoids, and her symbolism has much to do with the magic, the divinity, the intelligence, the transcendental, metaphysical inside of nature. So basically, when the sun meets Sedna once every year, that day, that very special occasion, one way or another will remind all of us that we're very, very magical, deep from within our DNA. This is where beauty almost becomes a divine power in her own right, and it simply just elevates our consciousness, raising the vibration of our earthly selves as well. Like, for example, the sun meeting Sedna in the sky, you go for a walk and you see such a beautiful flower, even though you're familiar with it, but the beauty of that moment and the sheer divine grace of that specific flower which just caught your eye, and it just creates a magical moment that you're gonna be remembering for a lot of time. But at the same time, it can be a smell or anything which has to do with our five senses. Sensing something physical, which kind of in that very special moment helps us transcend. And it becomes a beautiful memory, even though there might not be that much sense to it. Because how many times in life do we see flowers, smell, perfumes, or anything which have to do with our five senses? But sometimes there is a very special magic in a moment in time which becomes eternal, almost immortal within us. And with Jupiter entering into the sign of Pisces, well, everything is about magic, everything is about the spiritual, the ethereal, that which is not truly palpable, yet it is there, it surrounds us, it is within us, it permeates from every pore of our beings. There is magic, there is faith, there is a certain undescribable optimism in the air. Something from within us wants to believe as strongly as it is possible. It wants us to be connected to something much greater. It almost like calls us to escape the mundane, the earthly, the concrete plane, so to speak, where that escapism can be like going within, going into a dreamy state, daydreams, into fantasies, into deep spiritual states, altered states of consciousness. But of course, this can very well be like substances or plants which help us to make this transit that much easier. But every time when Jupiter is involved in anything and any celestial conversation, even the biggest blessing, we must know that overdoing it is extremely dangerous. And even, if it's purely an artistic or spiritual expression of this, we must not allow this to totally cut us off from reality and our sense of reality. We must not basically drown in the deep waters of the spirit or art or fantasy or illusion. We must always have like a straw that helps us breathe, which basically reaches the surface of the sea or water, or use what symbolism you like. We must make sure that that straw is never blocked off, because that is the moment when it becomes extremely dangerous. But the good part is that Jupiter is extremely benevolent in any case. So for example, it is the planet of expansion, and the sign of Pisces is dual in itself. So yes, it is magic, miracles, faith, spirituality, arts, fantasy, unconditional love, empathy, spirit over matter, of course. But at the same time, it is depression, it is self-victimization, it is doom and gloom, severe pessimism, a victim kind of mindset. It is also when we feel like the whole universe is against us, self-loathe, etc. So it can expand anything that lurks in there. But unlike Neptune, which kind of drowns us, which, it deluges us, Jupiter still keeps alive a tiny spark of hope, where even if we might end up in the most negative expression of this energy, like depression, dark night of the soul, whatever, there is still some hope within us that just won't let us go. It won't let us get to the bottom. It won't let us feel irreversibly lost. So even if we might end up feeling the not so favorable expression of this energy, it still serves a good purpose, because it gives us enough for us to be saturated, so that we will almost by instinct will want to experience the opposite of this. And that will also be expanded in the sense that what was just a tiny little bit of spark inside of us, it will blaze, it will dry off the ocean of sorrow, of darkness, or for example, especially for artists and daydreamers, it's like igniting your bioluminescence, where you can be almost like a sun even in the darkest ocean, and you can basically spread your light and illuminate everything and live in like perfect peace and serenity, and yet still have your passion and fires burning. And also Jupiter in the sign of Pisces, well, it's music, it is art, it is illusion and fantasy in its most finest. So let's say fantasy songs, paintings, anything that has to do with art can also make something not so pleasant beautiful. Like this reminds me of that ancient Mexican skull which is always decorated at the Day of the Dead. While the skull is in itself a not so optimistic symbol, but decorated and with flowers and painted and all of that, it becomes so very beautiful and it's so hopeful, so inspirational. Or let's say like a very dramatic ballad or a very sad song. Yes, it is sad, it makes us tearful, but the sheer beauty of it can just basically bless us. And also, whatever Jupiter is doing in its ancient ruling sign of Pisces, its nocturnal expression, because the daytime expression is ultimately Jupiter in Sagittarius, and that is not so dreamy, that is not so, how should I say, mystical, ethereal, that is much more direct. As in, one can dream about the cosmos and make certain correlations by channeling and by symbolism, Pisces, but other people can take a telescope or a space telescope and just look at the nebulas and the planets, and there is color, there is sound, and that is a totally different kind of understanding and magic. But anyway, I don't want to get into too much detail, because we'll have Jupiter in the sign of Pisces until the 28th of July, when it retrogrades out back into Aquarius. So it is just a taster. The true power of this Jupiter will truly show itself in 2022, where it will meet with Venus at a solar eclipse that will be extremely powerful. and ultimately when it meets with Neptune, so the ancient ruling planet of the sign and the modern ruler, handshaking so to speak, and who knows what that energy can create, because that is extremely rare. It kind of happens, as in the Piscean expression of it, once every 180 years or so. But anyway, if anyone is interested about a larger horoscope of what Jupiter transiting the sign of Pisces is going to represent both in 2021, when it just dips into this sign, and also 2022, just comment below, and if there is enough interest, I might create a special horoscope just taking a look at this Jupiter and what it can mean for all of us. So going back to next week, well, as I said, as soon as the sun leaves the sign of Taurus and enters Gemini on the 20th of May, it will start holding a square with Jupiter. So Jupiter amplifies, expands everything that it touches. The sign of Pisces is extremely idealistic, spiritual. It is all about the soul basically, and the deep, deep emotions. The sign of Gemini is much more practical. It is much more about self-expression and being connected to other people. It is also about words, communication, what we speak, what we write, how we relate to others, and basically also the bridge, the gateway between us and other people. So the positive side of this energy, well, it is ultimately poetry, communication, the beauty of words, what we project through our words and communication onto other people. We might really be able to impress them, move them. Our words might reach the very core of their beings, their hearts. It is also very persuasive energy. Yet it is, playful. It is adolescent. It doesn't mean that we are always going to be in that state. So whatever we say, whatever we project is valid for that moment in time and not forever. So under this energy, regardless of how you feel, how much love you feel, how much generosity, beauty, or whatever you feel, don't make long-term promises, especially, in a moral sense. I'll be your friend forever and such. Because feelings can change very quickly, especially both Gemini and Pisces are mutable energies, so it's not something very permanent. It is really good for love declarations and, to impress others with words, communications, even through your artistic expression, song, or maybe just communicating with songs, as in song titles, what song you send on Messenger or whatever to another person, what painting you send, a poem you write. But make sure that you don't overdo it, as in the person won't get the wrong idea, as in an illusionary sense. Like if you'd be sending love songs as a form of self-expression because you feel that very Gemini-like, as in adolescent-like, and you keep sending it to your best friend 24/7, they might get the wrong idea that maybe you have feelings for them. So make sure not to create unintentionally very delicate situations where you have to explain later on, and that explanation, that discussion might be very uncomfortable for both of you. Also be very careful what promises you make or what promises you believe. Now, of course, if we look at this purely artistically, whereas in you are the artist and the other person is your public or, the rest of the world, well then you can absolutely overdo it, because Jupiter is like a very lucky planet. that very passionate, intense song you create, the poem you write, the painting that you give everything into, that very unique design that just pops into your mind, whatever of artistic nature, overdo it because it can turn into a huge success. Just don't expect the success to be long term. Just seize the moment. If it's valuable today and this week, then, profit when it's the case. Don't expect it to be forever. But it can turn into a huge hit. Now, the not so favorable expression of this energy, be careful how much we victimize ourselves, because we might give the totally wrong impression. So, pessimism, negativity, certain psychological toxicity might simply scare other people away, or maybe it might come across as something pitiful, or as an illusion, something not really true or authentic, like someone who complains a lot, but they kind of add to it. Maybe the situation is real, but they greatly use this Jupiter to amplify it. They might wake up the next day with a friend, someone they know, organizing a fundraiser or charitable activity for them out of sheer compassion, when it's really not the case. And what a huge shock that would be for both the person complaining and both the friend, because, they might really not need it, and it might not come across as something very empathic, quite the contrary, as something humiliating. But again, what you can do if you feel this way, well, Jupiter in Pisces, the divine, the spirit world, a psychologist, a counselor is a person or an energy, a being, who can take everything that you complain, everything that you feel, you can amplify it as much as you want, because they'll reflect back at you the truth, disillusioning. So it can actually turn into the most favorable energy. And if it's like a soulmate, a best friend, well, they will ultimately tell you the truth, that you're exaggerating, that you're not really a victim, get over it. Look at the bright side, look at the other half of the glass. So this might be the most wonderful disillusioning, because it kind of slaps you back into reality in order for you to use this energy, this intense psychological energy, in the best ways possible. And of course, Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, holding the same type of conversation with Mercury. Well, the energy is quite similar, because, Neptune is illusion ultimately, so this will create a lot of misunderstandings, this will create a lot of illusions, misperceptions, misguidance, so to speak, and a need to clarify it, a need to talk it through. And again, the same kind of lesson, be careful what you communicate. Be careful to communicate from a place of self-understanding and self-knowledge, because if it's just a mood swing, even it won't last for that long. You might be feeling totally differently tomorrow, so be careful what you voice, what you, write, what you share with other people, because it might give a very wrong impression, and it might depict a fake image of who you are. The positive side of this energy, it is also, artistic. For example, for artists, if you're bored with the same theme, with the same, let's say, inspiration, or the same artistic pattern, if this makes sense, well, dig deeper. Imagination and fantasy has no limits, and dare to experiment. Some creations out of the depths of Neptune, so to speak, might not mean all that much for people, but there is, a potential where something might actually hit jackpot in the inspirational sense. This is where dare to go crazy, dare to go where you haven't gone before, but make sure it won't come across as total insanity. As in, be careful what you share of yourself and about yourself. And of course, globally speaking, this energy is illusion, truth, half-truths, lies, conspiracies, what is real, what is not real, is anything real at all? So basically, the sign of Pisces is the medical system, it is biochemistry, it is the virus, it is everything that has to do with the main theme playing out in our world right now. So once again, communication. Someone tells one version, the other person tells another version, and Gemini is the official communicator, so it can even be scientists contradicting each other. It can be members of the same government speaking something totally different. And Gemini is also a rebellious energy, not as Aquarius, but it has a very rebellious and impulsive side to it. So people might react with harsh words, harsh emails, complaints, etc. And of course, all of this takes place under a Saturn in its home sign of Aquarius, standing still in the sky. It goes retrograde on the 28th of May, but until it goes retrograde, it is stationary, so it stands still. And every planet that stands still has its symbolism greatly amplified. So Saturn in Aquarius is also the sacrifice we have to do for the greater good. But at the same time, it is everything that limits our spirit of community, reaching out to one another, censorship, censoring our words and communication, discrimination for the greater good. And I do believe that you can translate what I'm saying quite efficiently. So this will be a main theme. But Saturn also holds harmonious conversation, so that is a big blessing. Venus in Gemini holds a trine with Saturn in Aquarius, and a trine is a blessing, it is easy energy. Saturn can be a highly influential person who helps you out, for example, because you communicate your needs, Venus in Gemini. Saturn in Aquarius can be friends, circle of friends, social circle, which can come through as a blessing. They can help you, they can deliver positive messages, guidance, in a very, very practical sense, good advice, legal advice, help with papers, help with documents, projects, humanitarian efforts. If you're like a public speaker or an artist, this is also very good energy, because Venus in the sign of Gemini is the moment when you share your work, when you make it public, or you just simply share it with a friend, and a friend shares it with another friend. So this can spread like a virus symbolically in the best sense possible. It can be public recognition, it can be advancement in your career, in your position, job. It is a blessing of intellect. It can also be the best idea, the best tactical plan. It can be a huge blessing because Venus is ultimately also finances and beauty. It can make your intellect, your intellectual creativity, your words, your public speaking, what you share with the public, very, very attractive. And Saturn rewards, Saturn manifests. Saturn can give you a lot of fans. So people working with social media, people working with any public, this is a really, really good aspect. And of course, Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, also holds the same conversation with Saturn. But of course, that conversation is breaking up, but it was very active last week, which means that the best ideas, the inspiration, the communication, something was already planted. And now with Venus holding this conversation, the rewards are coming, the help is coming. And at the very end of the week, you have a grand trine, a grand air trine held by Venus, the Moon, and Saturn. Venus in Gemini, Moon in Libra. Saturn in Aquarius. So connection, finding that right person, right partner, business partner, associate, sponsor, romantic relationship, but you attract that romantic partner through what you communicate, what you share, what you express. Flirting, for example, Venus in the sign of Gemini, well, that's all about apps like Tinder or, social media or apps which connect people. It can be really, really good news, and it can be a very fortunate energy as a blessing. But it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. It can be business, contract, signing the deal, making that very important choice and decision. It can be like a pure blessing due to your professional notoriety, your skills, who you are as a highly experienced professional. It can also be basically money, value, currencies, a much better material situation due to getting more publicity like an advert, or someone with a great social influence, like for example an Instagram influencer noticing your work or whatever it is that you do and just getting you like followers or whatever, the way you just couldn't have done even with paying infinite amount of money for advertising. It can also play out in a totally different way, where it is a charity, solidarity, a program initiated by government or a non-profit group, Aquarius, where it helps you and your situation. It can also be at your job, career, anything that has to do with communication, or you are seeking for an expert, Saturn in Aquarius, and a friend of a friend or someone like that can recommend the best people possible. Yet, I must say again, all of this might not matter as much because we're still in the sphere of influence of the eclipse, and that is heavy. That is extremely psychologically, spiritually, intuitively very heavy, with Jupiter in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. It is like a tsunami of spiritual energy. It is like, of course, psychological, emotional. It is like an imminent incoming flood that will change the landscape for good. If this wasn't enough, Mars is also in a water sign, Cancer. Mars is the warrior. Cancer is your ethnic origins, your country, your nation, your family, people who you deeply love. So we can understand the conflict playing out in the world because it's this energy of the eclipse triggering them. Sagittarius is religion, religious differences, philosophical and perception differences basically. Jupiter amplifies these feelings and it turns bitter, it turns into aggression, it turns into sheer intolerance. And with the South Node in Sagittarius, is this not the lesson that we had to learn from the past and that we must not ever repeat again? So what is happening globally might affect us extremely because, a total lunar eclipse doesn't depend on us, doesn't really depend on what we can do now. It doesn't depend on our personal powers in any sense, not even spiritually, not even metaphysically, in the now. It is just fate. It is harvesting that which was already planted, so like it or not, it is what we're gonna get. And, with an eclipse, there is no way changing it anymore. And perhaps the violences in the world right now are just a warning sign, a reflection that as a species, we still have a lot of violence inside of us. We still have a lot of differences. Let us not forget that, because the eclipse can also give us a great power, like a massive, groundbreaking, either cosmological or scientific discovery. So it just tells us, I'm gonna give you this power, but make sure not to use it the way you used it in the past. Like, for example, with the discovery of how to work and, let's say, manipulate the atomic nucleus. Well, humanity didn't do something all that positive with this power. It nuked its own species, and that is profoundly unwise. Maybe the same theme is returning, as in a massive groundbreaking discovery that gives us a massive advantage. But this is where the South Node comes into play. Don't do with it what you did before, it's up to you. But this is just a reminder that you're still extremely aggressive and very immature in an emotional perspective as a species. So it isn't foreshadowing doom and gloom, quite the opposite. It is a powerful disillusioning that it doesn't matter what technology we have, we are still savages. So we definitely have to work on that side as well. And that means psychology, that means spirituality, that means empathy and profound understanding and acceptance of each other, regardless of our differences. That means like awakening that we're one species after all. So anyway, this concludes this week's horoscope. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like me to create a special Jupiter horoscope of its transit in the sign of Pisces, just let me know in the comments below. And if there is enough interest, I will definitely consider it. And thank you so much for listening, for all the likes, shares, and wonderful comments. If you'd like to support my work, you can find the link to my PayPal also in the description below. I wish everyone a wonderful, amazing, and magical week. May you get the very best of Neptune entering Pisces. Until next time, bye for now.